Proving Google wrong with 4 links. This video is going to give you 4 links to shut the SJWs up about biological differences between men and women. Let's get started. I'm sure you're aware of Google firing an engineer for his manifesto that claimed, oh my, that men and women are biologically different. In his manifesto, Google engineer James Damore bent over backwards to be politically correct, but it didn't matter. Google fired him anyway. Now, some of the media are claiming that there's no evidence for biological differences of men and women. A CNBC announcer said exactly that, and she's not alone. Listen to what she says.
There have been plenty of discussion about this, and discussion about the fact that there is no research to support this idea that there are biological causes for the lack of women in tech or the lack of women in leadership positions.
Sorry, but there's a mountain of evidence in the scientific journals that can shut you and all the other flat worlders up. I mean, the people at Google are not stupid, but I tend to see them as PCS, and that stands for politically correct stupid. They let their PC, their sexism, and their extreme white knighting for women keep them from seeing the simple truth that men and women are biologically different, and these differences play out on multiple fronts. This takes me back to what it must have been like when everyone thought the world was flat. And when folks were confronted with the idea that the world was actually round, they'd act just like Google. No, it's flat. You're a liar. You're a heretic. You're fired. Yeah, it's that bad. Anyway, I've been writing for years about these differences that Damore has referred to, and this info is out there in the research if you can simply look for it. I want to offer you 4 scientific links that will show that Damore was correct. Interestingly, the media, thanks to the lace curtain, has failed to cover most of what his manifesto discussed, so I suppose most people should get a pass since they haven't been really exposed to the truth. So it's past time they get that exposure, and many thanks to Google for being stupid and getting the discussion going. With that in mind, I want to offer you these 4 links that will easily disprove Google's silly mindset. Number 1, prenatal testosterone. First up is prenatal testosterone, which Damore mentioned briefly. This is an amazing sex difference where most boys in utero receive what's being called a testosterone flood at about 2 months. This flood changes their bodies and their brains. What does it do? Well, they're still not certain about everything, but here are 4 things that are likely to be impacted by this flood. Sexual orientation, gender identity, the way we play, and aggressiveness. Plus, there's a theorist named Simon Baron-Cohen who believes this flood impacts the brain and makes the male brain more likely to be interested in systems, while the female brain is more interested in empathy. Of course, this doesn't mean that women are not interested in systems or men are not capable of being empathetic. It's simply saying that on average, men will tend towards systems and things and women towards empathy. It's important to note that some girls also get greater levels of testosterone in utero. You probably know some of them. We call them tomboys. They tend to be more like the boys. So, as with all these differences, there's no black and white. There's lots of gray. Some girls will be more like the boys, and some boys will be more like the girls. But remember, the exception does not disprove the rule. Another function of this flood is that the prenatal testosterone primes the brain's receptors for future sensitivity to testosterone. Oh, and they also know that little boys shortly after birth have the second testosterone flood, which is being called the mini-puberty. This is just the tip of the iceberg of our biological differences, but it gives you a start in seeing the reality of these differences and how they start in utero. Here are the first 2 links on prenatal testosterone. The links are below. Have a look and just read the abstract to get a sense of what they say. Read the whole thing to get a deeper sense, but send them on to whoever claims we have no differences. Number 2, testosterone. Then there's the important shift in researchers' ideas about testosterone. Before, researchers have tried unsuccessfully to connect testosterone with aggression. Now they're changing course and saying that testosterone is really about striving for and maintaining status. Men and women both get testosterone, but the man's levels far exceed women's, especially after puberty. They're finding some other fascinating things about testosterone. It increases our willingness to take risks. It decreases our fears. It increases our threat vigilance. And on top of all that, it has the impact of resilience upon us as we move forward through stress. Here's a link. So think about it. Group A has juice going through their veins that pushes them to succeed, to win, to gain more status, and Group B doesn't have this. Which would you bet to get the job? Number 3 is IQ. Then there's the issue of IQ, which Damore very briefly touched on. Men have a slight IQ advantage after the age of 15, but the averages are very similar. That is, until you get to the upper and lower realms. It turns out that men predominate in both very low IQ and very high. There are approximately twice as many men with IQs above 130 as there are women. The higher you go, the more men predominate. Above 150, there are nearly 4 times as many men. Above 175, 18 times as many men. So here's a link to sex differences in IQ. So what does it take to be successful in STEM? You better have a high IQ. One set of data showed college grads by IQ and major. Guess what? The average estimated IQ for STEM majors was 130, with some being closer to 135. When you get into those IQ realms, guess what happens? More men than women. Fact. So, men have this juice in their veins that makes them want to win. They have less fear, are willing to take more risks. They tend to have the smarts to succeed, and they have a brain that's likely drawn towards systems rather than empathy. Boom. That means more engineers, don't you think? The predominance of men in STEM seems much more understandable when you start to factor in our biological differences. If you ever hear of anyone claiming we have no differences, like Google's done, just send them these 4 links and ask them to read them and get back to you. You likely won't hear back, and their heads are likely to explode. And so it goes. We haven't even talked about the male advantage that comes from the research-driven ideas behind precarious manhood and the male dominance hierarchy. You know, men and women are wonderfully different. One is not better than the other, but each has their areas where they shine. Can we love them for who they are, or are we going to make the horrible mistake of thinking they're exactly the same? Feminists and PC culture seem to have a hard time admiring men's STEM successes. Let it go. Men are good, as are you. If you like this video, please consider supporting my work on Patreon. These vids take many hours to produce. That's a lot of work, and in order to keep putting out quality content, I could really use your support. Thank you so much. Comment, subscribe, like, share, hit that notifications button. We'll see ya.